Welcome to the Sal and Scott podcast, the show that covers everything Bay Area sports has to offer and more. Now your hosts, Sal Castaneda and Scott Reese.
Episode 3 on the air. Welcome, everybody. The Sal and Scott podcast, the creatively challenged named podcast, ready to rock and roll. And Sal, it's a good day to be talking sports because we are fresh off the Major League Baseball trade deadline, and great to have two teams both very much in the thick of it in their respective leagues, and both of them did some things before the Friday 1 p.m. Pacific time deadline.
I'm afraid to put my phone down still. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know it's we're a little removed now, but man, things are happening. And when the Dodgers made that blockbuster trade, you kind of knew that the Giants had something in them. And we were talking off the air here that this trade deadline was really active, where we've had a couple that were not so much.
So we'll get into all of that, but special guest today. It's not just you and me sort of waxing philosophical. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But today, our good buddy, Casey Pratt, the senior sports producer slash on-air guy slash bearded guy from KGO ABC 7, joining us now. Case, how's things in your neck of the TV world?
As you know, it's a little bit crazy. You do have the MLB trade deadline going off right as we were getting ready for this podcast. We had the NBA draft last night. I'm actually at Chase Center, currently taking a COVID test. I have to wait 30 minutes for the results. I'll update you on that when they come. And on top of all that, we have NFL training camp. So it is crazy right now.
Yeah, and Sal, that kind of gets us to something we were talking about off air. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the Giants and A's, this time of year, man, it's fun to be a sports guy. It's fun to be a sports fan.
I ask you guys how you do it. Is this your favorite time of the year? And I'll ask you first, Casey. With baseball, and then the Warriors did what they did last night. The 49ers are coming into camp. Trey Lance signed. There's no shortage. How do you actually put together a segment? What do you lead with? What do you leave out? How much time do you spend? Who makes these decisions? Is that you?
Most of the nights, yeah, it is me. It's a collaborative effort, though. And right now it's pretty crazy, but really, as Scott knows, back at our old Comcast Sportsnet days when we were the TV home of the A's and Giants and the Warriors and the Sharks, and we had all the Raiders and all that other stuff, Niners, there were some sportpocalypse type days where every single team was playing and we'd have to split studios and they'd send us out into the field, and it was just chaos. So right now it's busy, but it's not quite sportpocalypse. I'd say obviously the MLB trade deadline is the lead, though, because you look at the Giants making a big move. The A's have made a bunch of moves. So that's going to steal the thunder a little bit. Although when this COVID test thing blinks done, and hopefully I'm clear as I am vaccinated, get your vaccines, folks. I'm going to walk right outside this door here, and I'll be watching the Warriors introduce their new picks. So it is crazy, but I think the deadline is the deal today.
Yeah, and the difference between what we got now and those sportpocalypse type days is those were days when you had 4, 5, 6 different teams all playing on the same day, right? And you had multiple shows and studios and actual games. Right now, it's more about the news than the actual games, right? It's about the draft. It's about obviously the trade deadline. And look, with all due respect to the Warriors and their new picks, let's dive in, guys, to what the Giants and A's did. Case, I know you're dialed in with the A's side of things, so let's start there. Big splash with Starling Marte, who is a really, really good baseball player. Then they follow it up by bringing in Josh Harrison, who can be sort of a super utility guy, and Yan Gomes that gives them a veteran catcher to not to back up, but to coexist with Sean Murphy. Your thoughts, just big picture on what they did at the deadline.
I think they made a lot of good depth moves. Obviously, Starling is the guy that is going to get all the attention. But, in picking up Yan Gomes and picking up Josh Harrison, that's two guys, both 34 years old, both very solid players. Harrison being more of a super utility type of guy, and Gomes can back up at catcher. So I think what they did was they really bolstered their team depth and brought in a little bit of veteran experience and two guys that can hit for average and are very capable. So I think those moves today really help solidify the team. It's not like the superstar type move, but it's going to do a lot for them. And that helps. The middle infield they've gotten a lot out of Jed Lowry, far more than anybody expected from the Stanford guy, Scott. But I think that it helps a lot adding in Josh Harrison to that mix.
So, hey, Casey, the A's have been struggling with the Astros. They're, as of this recording, they're 5.5 games back. It doesn't seem like the other teams are going to make a play. So what do you think? Do you think that if the A's were closer to the Astros, do you think they would have made all these moves? Because these are a lot of moves. Do you think that they're worried about perhaps not being able to catch up unless they make these moves?
I'd say absolutely. I'm not sure catching the Astros is truly on the table, but you saw what happened early in the season with the A's when they got off to that wretched start and then caught crazy fire. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but I think they're really solidifying their wild card hopes, if you ask me, with these moves. And, up until the last couple days, I was almost thinking the A's could consider themselves sellers based on the struggles they had had. So in making these moves, it's a sign that they're going all in for another playoff run, which is good to see. And really one thing that's interesting about the A's, whether it's David Forst or Billy Beane in the past, if they got a shot, they're not afraid to go for it. And what they're doing here is going for it. And, it's entertaining for us to watch.
So every time the A's make a move at the trade deadline, I can't help but think of Moneyball and the scene where Billy Beane's on the phone, right, begging, begging for the extra, $600,000 so that they can bring in Ricardo Rincon or whatever it was. Your thoughts on the A's going for it, but in a measured sense. They're not taking on guys who they are going to be committed to with big money past this season. I mean, Starling Marte, great player, but he's a rental. He's going to be in Oakland Athletic for 2 months.
Yeah, pretty much all these guys are rentals, which is going to get money off the books. What's funny is a lot of times the A's go for it at the detriment of their own selves. Like, you remember the Yoenis Cespedes trade with Leicester, and I don't know that it necessarily always has worked out for them when they go for it. It cost them, but they're at least giving it a shot. I got to appreciate that. And, you see them deal a guy like Jesus Luzardo to Miami, which they had such high expectations for. That's a big chip to be trading away here for a rental in Marte. So while I think that Luzardo has really not risen to the occasion when given the opportunities and just really wasn't ready to contribute yet again this year. It's a good move in that sense, but it is one that you could see a couple of years from now really being painful, especially as Marte and all these other rentals are long gone by then.
Well, let me just follow up real quick, Sal, and I'll throw this out to both of you. You talk about Luzardo. It's a big name, right? I mean, this isn't just some minor league pitcher. This is a guy who was a top prospect who had a lot of success when he first came up to the bigs. He fought through injuries. This was a guy who looked like a potential future ace. Now, that said, his ERA is in the mid-sixes in the majors, and it's just as bad at AAA. So the question is, was this a function of the organization essentially giving up on Luzardo and saying, you know what, he's not what we thought he was? Or is this merely hey, we're going to win at all costs and win now, and we got to do what we got to do?
Well, I mean, rentals, I still have a bad taste in my mouth, Zach Wheeler and Carlos Beltran, all right? So
yeah.
And you saw what happened there. You're going to look like a genius if you win it all. You're going to look like a dog if you didn't. With that said, maybe a change of scenery will help this kid, and maybe it's good for everyone, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Case, what do you think about this? Are they giving up on him?
I think they did. They obviously did give up on him. And I think that Miami will be a good fit for him. It's close to home. But, you look at what happened with him. They're relying heavily on him this year. And he broke his hand playing video games. It was a sign of immaturity when they needed him the most. He struggled mightily. He struggled in AAA, as you mentioned. And you look at a team that says, hey, we need somebody to contribute now, and that guy is clearly not Jesus Luzardo, unfortunately. And, Scott, I know you follow baseball very closely, and Sal too. Every single year, I feel like I'm saying, can't wait for AJ Puck and Jesus Luzardo to come in here and just really show us what they got, and it's going to push everybody over the edge, and it's going to solidify the rotation, or maybe it solidifies the bullpen as longman. Every year we say the same thing, and every year these guys are either hurt or ineffective, and it's like you can't wait forever. So while I think it's tough to see them trade a prospect the level of Luzardo, it makes sense because you ask the guys, is Luzardo here? Is he performing? Is he doing anything for the team right now? And the answer is no, not right now. And maybe he would in the future, but how many years are we going to say, wow, I can't wait for Luzardo to come in here and light it on fire? And then never happens.
Right. That's a great call. AJ Puck, I was just thinking about that the other day. Like, what in the world is going on? Like, okay, he's back and he's pitching, and yet he's still buried at AAA and not effective even against minor league hitters. So it's not turning into a success story on that front either. So the Giants guys made a big splash very late in the session, right? Just before the 1 p.m. Pacific time deadline on Friday. They got their man. They got Kris Bryant, which is a really good fit from a positional standpoint. They've been without Longoria for most of the year. Bryant, good clubhouse guy, not going to be a chemistry issue. And, I also believe, Sal, that this is a move made with an eye on the future as well. Bryant's a free agent. He's not signed past this season. But this is a guy who I think would fit long-term with this team. And don't think for a second that didn't factor into the calculus here of Farhan Zaidi thinking that, you know what, if we bring him in, if we go deep into the playoffs, maybe get to a World Series, and he likes it here, and we are willing to pay him market value, that he'll find a new home, and we could have this guy who's an all-star caliber player for the next 5 years.
Well, I want to ask both of you guys. I'll start with you, Casey. How much do you think that the front office makes reactive moves? Because you saw what the Dodgers did, and the Giants, if the Dodgers don't make that trade, that blockbuster trade, they're still doing well. Do you think that they do go out and get Bryant necessarily, or do you think that at this point they had to go out and get someone?
I do think they had to, but let's just take the Dodgers out of the equation. That's an impossible thing to say in reality. But when you're a competing team and you're at the deadline and you're getting ready for that final push, if you don't add a chip to the roster, the guys in the clubhouse are going to say, hey, front office, you don't believe in us? And it's going to kill the team. So, whether the Dodgers were nipping at their heels or not, whether there's teams that are a serious threat that are increasing their roster, they're going to do it anyways, because you have to show your players that you're willing to go all in and get somebody that's going to push them over that hump. So I think Kris Bryant, it's a great pickup for him because of his multi-position eligibility. I think that Evan Longoria is due back here probably by next week. So really, they're getting a huge infusion. Sometimes teams can really increase their skill level just by letting guys get healthy. And in this case, it's almost like they're adding both Longoria and Bryant at the deadline, which are big moves for them. One of them they didn't even really have to make in Longoria, but I think that the Dodgers went absolutely absurd, as they tend to. So the Giants were forced to make a move, but I think they would have made that move anyways, to answer your question.
Well, and of course, the obvious question, when you're evaluating a trade, you got to look at the other side too, right? So news breaks, the Giants are getting Kris Bryant, and the Twitterverse is up in arms, greatest thing ever, yay Giants, this is the guy we need. And then it was like, okay, but wait, what are they giving up? And then we got the fake Twitter news that the return was Lamont Wade Jr. and Joey Bart, and everybody's like, WTH, right? Wait a minute, what are we doing here? And that turned out to be patently false, right? So shame on whoever started that and whoever perpetuated the Joey Bart.
WTH, you're such a nice guy. You're such a good, wholesome guy.
I'm just trying to speak in. Casey's younger. I'm trying to speak in language he understands.
Okay, all right.
But it turns out the giveaway was an outfielder, Alexander Canario, who's a minor league outfielder, rated as the 9th best price prospect in the Giants system, and a pitcher named Caleb Killian, rated as the 30th best prospect in the Giants system. So they gave away 2 nice pieces to the Cubs that I'm sure Chicago is very happy to get back, because the Cubs obviously in full rebuilding mode now. But the Giants didn't have to touch any of their top 8 prospects, so they really kept the organizational depth intact, and they still got a guy who, yes, he's a rental, but he could be more than that.
Boy, those Cubs fans, man, on Twitter, because I happen to be on Cubs Twitter for some reason, they're not happy with the fire sale, obviously, because fans rarely understand fire sales, right? They rarely understand these things. They're not looking at the long term, and that's why what Zaidi has done here in San Francisco is nothing short of amazing. We're ahead of I don't play for the Giants. I am a fan, though. As a Giants fan, I say that we are ahead of where I thought the team would be at this point. Now, you guys aren't fans. You guys are working in the business, but give me the unbiased perspective. Are the Giants farther along than you thought they'd be, Casey?
100%. Absolutely. I think they're much farther along than anybody anticipated. That's a testament to Farhan Zaidi, who made tons and tons and tons of roster churning moves, and then guys were starting to stick and it was starting to work. And I think that this move absolutely paid off. And it's funny because, you know, right before we started recording this, as I was getting my COVID test prep, which, oh my, breaking news, done and negative.
Congratulations.
Nice.
Congratulations, man.
Breaking
You look
news,
negative.
done and negative. Again, get your vaccines, folks. So
came out wrong.
back to the subject at hand. Let's see if I can keep my train of thought. The thing with the Giants is they're way ahead of schedule. You're bringing in a Kris Bryant. That's great. And Scott and I, for years, we were in this NL-only fantasy baseball league. So, like, when it comes to fantasy baseball, we're really in the weeds, nitty-gritty style on a lot of players. And when they first made that trade and the return was announced, we were both like, who? And I think that's a pretty good sign, not to peel back the layer too much, but I think that's a pretty good sign that the Giants made a good trade.
You know, it's funny because as you said that, I was checking my NL only fantasy team to see if, you know, some of these guys who right, guys who weren't closers a half hour ago now are closers. And we should also reiterate here, we're recording this Friday. So as we speak, the trade deadline has just finished. I realize by the time you hear it, it's old news.
I have another question for both of you. Pardon me. Please indulge me because I have one more question I just thought of when Casey was answering. It's possible that it could be a good trade even if one team, like let's say the Cubs, doesn't get the stars. Maybe these guys don't end up being who they want them to be, to get that salary off the books and to start fresh no matter what, right?
Well, you're saving a couple months worth of salary. And again, we don't know the particulars. And it's possible, it's always possible the Giants are picking up some of, you know, how much of Bryant's salary are they picking up? How much are the Cubs picking up? Again, apologies. We probably know this by Monday when this podcast comes out.
So my question to reframe it is it possible that, you know, sometimes you say, oh, that's a bad trade for them? No, because they're trying to accomplish something that we don't know.
Well, the point of a fire sale is it's a white flag. You are admitting you're not going to win this year. And if you're not going to win this year, what good do Javi Baez and Kris Bryant and Craig Kimbrell do you? If they're, you know, guys, Bryant and Baez in particular, are going to be free agents at the end of the year, nothing says the Cubs can't bring them back, right? Mm-hmm. Anthony Rizzo, the other one. I mean, they could bring any or all of them back at the end of this year if they want them to be part of their future plans. So, you know, from that standpoint, if you're giving up on the season, you're throwing in the towel, there doesn't seem to be a downside other than disgruntled fans because, you know, you're getting something for essentially nothing that matters in the here and now. Case?
Yeah, I 100% agree because you never know what some of these prospects are going to turn into, and sometimes they could end up exceeding all expectations and being the guys that you're mad are getting traded 4 years down the road. You know, growing up following the A's, I know all about that. So a lot of these guys will come in, you don't know who they are, and then in a few years, they're the guys that are your corner infielders. Like you look at, you know, when the A's got rid of Josh Donaldson and everybody was heartbroken, and now they have Matt Chapman there. So, I mean, it's one of those situations where in a few years, we'll probably be very upset Matt Chapman's being traded.
Yeah, right.
It's just
no, say it isn't so, man.
Replenishing.
No, but that's the thing, right? We can't truly evaluate any of what went on, you know, in the last 72 hours for, I don't know, sometimes 72 months, right? I mean, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5 years,
right,
you know, before you can really evaluate exactly who got the better end of a deal.
Right. You never know.
Yeah, it's all about the long
you can
game.
Go back, though. You can certainly go back.
You can
look at patterns,
yeah,
right, and say, hey, that wasn't a very good move. Well, yeah, you're a genius now.
Or like when Billy Beane traded Nelson Cruz to acquire Keith Ginter before Nelson Cruz became Nelson Cruz. And
you know, what's funny, Casey, is some of the guys you keep bringing up that were traded 100 years ago by the A's at the deadline were traded again, you know, on Friday at the deadline. Nelson Cruz, obviously, earlier in the week, and then John Lester was traded right before the deadline. So it's, some of these guys, I don't know what it is, they just continue to be deadline fodder.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they're attractive to somebody. One man's trash is another man's treasure, I suppose.
That is correct.
Well, and some guys, you know, the thing is, some guys obviously have no trade clauses, and that means they control, you know, things a little bit more. How much does that come into play when it comes to, obviously that means that they're in the driver's seat, right? They can veto things.
Well, yeah, you look at Max Scherzer, who's got a contract where he could veto things, and who knows if that was a factor. We'll probably know by the time we finish recording at some point, but maybe he didn't want to go to the Padres and wanted to go to the Dodgers instead. There's some guys with a lot of control, but it is a rare case, I'd say. It's not super common.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Max Scherzer. So first of all, the backstory, as I understand it, on Scherzer, he was a 10-5 guy, which in baseball vernacular means you've been in the bigs 10 years, at least the last 5 with the same team. Then you have rights to veto any trade. And he had made it clear that he would not go to the East Coast. If he was going to be dealt, it was going to be to California. It was essentially saying it's going to be the Dodgers, Padres, or Giants. Mm-hmm. So Scherzer laid the groundwork for the deal to LA. And had that not been the case, who knows? Maybe it's the Yankees, maybe it's the Red Sox, and we're having a very different conversation. But Casey, I don't know about you. When I saw the alert last night that the deal had been agreed upon in principle between the Dodgers and the Nationals, with not only Scherzer, but Trey Turner, who is one of my favorite players in baseball. I love Trey Turner. I nearly fell out of my chair. And I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen a lot of deals and a lot of blockbusters. I don't often fall out of my chair, but this one was a wow moment. I mean, just can you give us some context, the enormity of what the Dodgers just did last night?
It's pretty spectacular because I, like you, did a very similar thing where all the talk was where's Scherzer going to go? Where's Scherzer going to go? And then you see he's going, and then you're like reading down, you're like, wait, what? They got Trey Turner too? Like, how did they even pull that off? It's an absurd move. And if you look at what the Dodgers have now, they have Seager coming back too. So they got Chris Taylor, who's been crushing it down there. They have so many strong middle infielders now that adding Trey Turner, it's almost an embarrassment of riches. And unfortunately, that's kind of how the Dodgers have been rolling for the last few years. It was an insane move.
It is. I mean, that roster, it's stupid, right? I mean, to add those guys.
And what
nuts.
Casey said is right on. That's how they've been rolling the last few years.
Sure.
You would think that they would have more than one chip to show for it, right? Like, I mean, as a Giants fan, Giants fans are lucky that the Dodgers don't have even more to show for what they've been doing, because they have been spending. This trade obviously is the cream of all trades but they have been spending a lot.
That is true. The counter argument would be, yes, they only have one championship to show for it, but they have multiple World Series in a very short period of time. And once you get to the World Series, I don't care how good your roster is, the other guy's really good too. And so you win some, you lose some. But the bottom line is, you're, as much as you're making these deals to win a World Series, you're making these deals to get to a World Series, to give yourself a chance to win. And the Dodgers have done that repeatedly.
And also to be competitive, obviously, and to get people in the seats and to be always in that top tier of teams, Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox. You want to, you can tell that the ownership they won't settle for. Can you imagine if the Dodgers were like, oh yeah, they're the third place team? That just wouldn't.
No.
They wouldn't fly.
So Casey, let me throw this out at you as a master of psychology that I know you are. Max Scherzer not only fills the X's and O's starting rotation void left by Trevor Bauer, who I don't think is going to pitch again this season, although obviously we don't know that for sure. But, and Sal and I have talked about this on this podcast, the shrapnel from the Bauer ordeal inside the clubhouse has got to be tangible. How much does this vanquish the negativity? Not only are you getting an all-star pitcher to replace an all-star pitcher, but you're getting a clubhouse leader, a great guy, and now everybody can kind of just say, Trevor who?
Yeah,
and I don't know so much how we can attest for the scandalous nature of what Trevor Bauer did and the impacts on the clubhouse, because I don't know that a lot of guys are super worried about getting into other people's business. But as far as replacing a pitcher that is an ace, not only is Scherzer that, he is a veteran, he is a leader, and he's going to take an immense amount of pressure off of everybody on that team. And you look at what happens when you acquire a superstar or you have a guy that can shoulder that load. Like, I used to always talk about the A's and Yoenis Cespedes back in the day before they traded him, because I would walk around and I would talk to the hitters on the team, And they all joke that it was almost like having 10 hitters in the lineup with Cespedes because he was such a lightning rod that he would take the pressure off everybody else, and then they could just go in there and kind of do their job and not have to worry about it. So having a guy like Scherzer, who is a lightning rod, so to speak, that will take any and all pressure and shoulder the load that postseason run is going to have on that roster. I'm not saying they're inexperienced in the postseason. They've been there before, but having a guy like that, having a guy like Kershaw, it really relaxes everybody. It saves the bullpen innings and work. And, starting pitching is contagious. You see it happen a lot. And when you have a guy like Scherzer in there, guys tend to just take their turn and they want to build off of what the other guy did. And you kind of can catch a little bit of momentum there. As much as it doesn't speak to a real statistic, momentum counts.
So Scherzer, guys, is immediately the number one, right? There's no other way.
Well, Buehler, Kershaw, take your pick.
Who is the number? Casey, who's the number one on that staff?
I don't know if it even really matters at this point.
Right.
Because, I mean, as Scott said, Buehler's lights out too. So Kershaw's been there, done that in many, 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 many years. And so, I mean, if I was a hitter, who would I want to face the least? It's hard to say. I might go Scherzer, but it doesn't really matter. It's a monster rotation, and you're really not going to have a great chance facing any of those guys in the postseason.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. This was the nuttiest trade deadline period that I can ever remember. And maybe it's the recency effect. I can't remember anything like this in recent memory. We got just a couple of minutes left. Sal, I think maybe we would be remiss given Casey's locale at the current moment as we record this, sitting in the Chase Center waiting to cover the Warriors and the unveiling of the draft picks and whatnot. Just quick thoughts, Case, on the selections of Jonathan Kuminga at number 7, Moses Moody at number 14. There was a pretty high chance, I think we all believed, that one or both of those picks would go elsewhere prior to the draft. The Warriors keep them both, at least for now. What do you think?
So initially when the pick was made, obviously Kuminga is an upside guy, and it doesn't necessarily help them win now. And I really thought their focus coming into this would be winning now based on Stephen Curry and Draymond Green and the potential return of Klay Thompson. And I wasn't sure how that would sit with the roster because, those guys have a lot of influence and those guys all need somebody that can contribute immediately. That's where the Mo Moody pick comes in, where I think he's more ready to win now. When I heard Bob Myers talk last night, though, guys, the big thing that I really had as my main takeaway is Myers told a story that Draymond Green was up in Tokyo, where he's playing for Team USA, and he texted Bob Myers, Kuminga. And then he's like, I don't know if he'll be up there. All right. And they took him. And then he later texted Moody to Bob Myers. And Bob Myers was like, well, he might not be available, but we'll see. And then sure enough, he was available. So not only did Draymond call his shots there, he seems to be in approval. And that's the biggest thing because, as you know, Draymond is almost like having another assistant GM on your team. He's a guy that really loves being in on draft prep and watching the guys work out and do all those things. He's probably a future GM someday. So when you hear that, you realize, okay, so that means these guys do have the full endorsement of guys like Draymond and probably to the same extent Curry. And, they found a way to toe the line. Let's see what kind of veterans they might add, but between win now and win later. And that's a big problem the Warriors are going to have to kind of figure out is, can they win now without mortgaging their future? And when you look at a guy like Wiseman, Kuminga, Moody now, Jordan Poole, Eric Paschall was great as a rookie, kind of fell off a bit last year, but maybe they're starting to have these pieces to build for the future while hopefully supporting the needs of a Steph Curry who just played out of his freaking mind last year.
Casey, when I was watching the Milwaukee Bucks win it after 50 years, and me being a longtime Warriors fan growing up in the Bay Area and following the team, I got a little bit sentimental when the Warriors won it just recently here. It was really nice to see Milwaukee do it. And actually, quite frankly, I was wrong about Milwaukee. I didn't think they would do it. I think a lot of people were. And I like that feeling. I think a lot of Warriors fans were watching. Oh, look, that's nice. 50 years. I remember that. 2015. Can the Warriors get back and give us that feeling again? Those of us Warrior fans, and now they're in San Francisco. Can they can they repeat? Is the window closing? Honestly, these players, Steph and Clay are getting a little older. Is that window shut down, or is it still a little open? Well, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I don't think it's shut down. I think they have a good 2 to 3 more years left in this strong contention window. Last year, you have to remember, we're about to watch Kuminga and Moody get introduced, but at this exact same time, the Warriors were reeling with the news that Klay Thompson had just torn his Achilles, and they had to kind of scramble because going into last year, there was a lot of hope with Curry and Klay back and Draymond that they were going to be a really good team, but losing Klay in the manner that they did right before the draft really hurt them, and it hurt their ability to pick up those veterans that could really solidify the roster. So now going into this year, you're going to have a healthy Curry. You're going to have a returning Klay. Draymond's been good. And I think that might be enough to sell some of these veterans that they need to come in to kind of solidify this team. So I think you're going to have a good maybe 2 to 3 more years of this team being a really, really strong competitor. And then we'll see how these guys develop.
Let me give you my final thought on that. I agree with Casey. I think the window is still open. But honestly, the answer to that question lies in Klay Thompson's lower extremity, right? If Klay comes back and is Klay, this team can still win. If Klay comes back and is a shell of his former self, which I don't expect, but if that happens, then this team is a player short of being able to compete, in obviously a stacked Western Conference. My 2 cents for what it's worth on the draft. I love the Kuminga pick because of the upside. I think, and again, you brought up the Bucks. What did Bucks fans think of the Giannis pick, right, when he went number 15? He's raw. He's not ready. We see the potential, but, we don't know if – well, that can work out,
that well,
right?
yeah.
So this is an upside pick, and if you're also building for the future, this is using a lottery pick to try and win the lottery, right? Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is. Moses Moody, I'm a little bit more lukewarm on. I think he was a good college player. I watched him a little bit. I think he was a guy who feasted on some of the subpar competition in the SEC, not as good against the big boys all the time. Again, young, upside, clearly Bob Myers and Draymond Green, for that matter, know a lot more than I do. The one thing I will say, and I don't know if, Case, if you have an opinion on this before we let you go, I was really disappointed that Kris Duarte went 13 to the Pacers because he is a guy I watched a ton in the Pac-12 over the last couple of years. That guy is a fantastic basketball player, and for weeks and months I was saying this guy needs to get more draft love. He should be in the top 15, and lo and behold, winds up going 13. But I have a feeling, and I think Monty Poole came out with a report supporting this, that was the guy the Warriors were eyeing all along at 14.
Well, especially after taking somebody who you kind of consider more of a future pick.
Right.
When you see Kris Duarte on the board, you say, okay, this is a guy that's ready now. And that, to me, was exactly the kind of pick that they needed to make in that spot. The problem is he got taken right before their pick.
Yeah.
So that was 100% the type of player that they would have been ready to go after if given the opportunity, and, just didn't exactly pan out that way.
Yeah. All right, Case, really appreciate your time. Congratulations again on the COVID test. Way to vax up, my man.
Negative.
And you'll need to present proof of vaccination every time you come on the podcast from here on in.
All right, well, now I know how to do these rapid tests, and I'll see if the Warriors PR staff will let me borrow a few more in case you guys ever need me again. And you know what, guys? Honestly, it would just be so nice to see you in person again. I think the last time I saw each of you was probably at your producer, the amazing Jason Toops' comedy show in Alameda, which was an amazing night. I believe that was the last time I saw either of you in person, and you're both great guys. Big fans of both of you, and I would love to be able to see you again, give you a hug, shake your hand, say hi.
Oh, look at that. Virtual fist pound, man.
Yeah,
Virtual fist pound.
Getting sentimental at the end here. All right.
We can probably make that happen.
Appreciate it. And you're giving Toops a big head. We can't have that.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, Casey.
Lunchbox, man. All right, have a good one, guys.
All right.
All right, so that'll do it for episode 3. It's in the books. We're moving on. Big things again next week. Don't want to give it away, but we're working on some good guests, and we'll reconvene, man.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, Scott.
He's Sal. I'm Scott. That guy was Casey, and we'll talk to you next week.